hard. Have you ever felt like you're trapped behind an invisible wall when trying to speak English? You know the words, hard. You've studied the grammar. But when it's time to actually open your mouth and speak, something freezes inside you, hard. If you're nodding right now, you're not alone. Today, hard. I'm going to share something deeply personal with you, my own journey from being paralyzed with fear to speaking English with confidence, hard. And the best part, the strategies I discovered along the way aren't complicated or expensive. They're simple techniques anyone can use, hard, no matter where you are in your learning journey. My name is Emma, and before I became fluent in English, hard, I was just like many of you, frustrated, overwhelmed, and sometimes ready to give up entirely, hard. But I discovered a path forward that changed everything for me, and today, hard, I'm going to show you exactly how you can follow that same path. By the end of this episode, hard, you'll understand why traditional English learning methods often fail, hard, the psychological barriers that might be holding you back without you even realizing it, and the practical, hard, step-by-step approach that can transform your relationship with English forever, hard. So if you've ever felt stuck or discouraged in your English learning journey, hard, this episode could be the turning point you've been waiting for. When I first decided to learn English, I felt completely overwhelmed, hard. There seemed to be an endless mountain of information to climb, thousands of vocabulary words, complicated grammar rules, hard, and pronunciation that felt foreign to my mouth. I remember looking at all these elements and wondering, hard, how will I ever remember all of this? It felt impossible, like trying to memorize every grain of sand on a beach, hard. Maybe you felt this way too, that paralyzing feeling of not knowing where to start or how to make progress when there's just so much to learn. Hard, it's a common feeling among language learners, but here's the first insight I want to share with you, hard. You don't need to learn everything at once. Learning English isn't about memorizing an entire language in one go, hard. It's about building a foundation and then adding to it gradually, piece by piece, hard. Think of it like constructing a house. You need to lay the foundation before you can put up the walls, hard. And the walls need to be in place before you add the roof. So where do you start? For me, hard. The breakthrough came when I began focusing on the basics, the words and phrases I would actually use in my daily life, hard. I started with simple greetings and introductions. Hello, thank you, how are you, and goodbye. These might seem too simple if you're intermediate or advanced, hard. But mastering the fundamentals gives you a solid foundation to build upon. I carried a small notebook everywhere I went, hard, jotting down new words and phrases that seemed useful. During free moments waiting for the bus, standing in line at the grocery store, or before falling asleep, I would review what I'd written, hard. This simple habit created consistent exposure to the language without requiring me to set aside large blocks of time specifically for studying, hard. One of the biggest hurdles I faced early on was the fear of speaking. Have you ever known exactly what you wanted to say in English, hard? But when the moment came to speak, your mind went blank and your heart started racing, hard. That was me every single time I tried to use English in conversation, hard. The fear of making mistakes and looking foolish was so strong that it actually prevented me from speaking at all, hard. But here's something I learned that completely changed my perspective. Making mistakes isn't just okay, it's necessary, hard. Every single error is actually a stepping stone toward fluency. Think about how children learn their first language, hard. They make countless mistakes, but they keep talking anyway, and eventually they become fluent speakers, hard. I made a conscious decision to adopt this childlike approach to learning. Instead of avoiding situations where I might make mistakes, hard, I began seeking them out. When I said something incorrectly, I wouldn't get upset or embarrassed, I'd simply try again, hard. This shift in mindset was incredibly liberating. Without the paralyzing fear of making errors, hard, I found myself speaking more often and improving much faster. So if you take nothing else away from this episode, remember this, hard. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. In fact, welcome them as evidence that you're pushing yourself to grow, hard. The person who makes the most mistakes in language learning is often the person who makes the most progress, hard. Another transformative insight came when I changed my approach to listening. When you're learning a new language, hard, it's natural to feel like you need to understand every single word you hear, hard. I used to get frustrated and discouraged when I couldn't follow a conversation or comprehend a TV show completely. But here's the truth, hard. You don't need 100% comprehension to benefit from listening practice. Even when you only understand a portion of what you're hearing, hard, your brain is still processing the sounds, rhythms, and patterns of the language. This exposure is invaluable, even if it's not perfect, hard. I started incorporating regular listening practice into my daily routine. During my commute to work in Edinburgh, hard, I would listen to a radio show from London. At first, I probably understood less than half of what was being said, hard, but I kept listening day after day. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, my comprehension improved, hard. Words that once sounded like an indistinguishable blur began to separate into recognizable phrases, hard. Accents that had seemed impenetrable became familiar and understandable. This taught me an important lesson about language learning. Hard, sometimes progress happens beneath the surface, hard, invisible to us until we suddenly realize we can understand something that used to be incomprehensible, hard. So be patient with yourself and trust the process, even when it feels like you're not making progress. Now, hard. Let's talk about making language learning enjoyable, because the truth is, if you don't find some pleasure in the process, hard, you're unlikely to stick with it long term, hard. One of the most effective techniques I discovered was connecting my English learning to things I already enjoyed. For me, hard, that meant watching TV shows in English. I started with a series I was already familiar with and loved, hard. First using subtitles in my native language. Once I was comfortable with that, I switched to English subtitles, hard, which helped me connect the spoken words to their written form. Finally, I challenged myself to watch without any subtitles at all. Hard. Was it difficult? Absolutely, hard. There were moments when I felt lost and had to rewind multiple times to understand a single line of dialogue, hard. But because I was invested in the story and characters, hard. It didn't feel like studying, it felt like entertainment with the added benefit of language learning. Hard. The key here is to find your own English language passion. Maybe for you it's not TV shows but music, books, cooking videos, hard sports commentary or video games. Hard. Whatever captures your interest naturally is the perfect vehicle for language learning because it provides both motivation and context for the new words and phrases you're encountering. Hard. Pronunciation was another significant challenge in my English learning journey. Hard. There were times when I knew exactly what I wanted to say, but people still couldn't understand me because my pronunciation was off. Hard. This was especially frustrating because it made me feel like my knowledge of vocabulary and grammar was useless if I couldn't make myself understood. Hard. The solution I found was simple but effective: practice speaking out loud, even when no one else is listening. Hard. I would repeat new words and phrases over and over again until they felt natural coming out of my mouth. Hard. Sometimes I would record myself speaking and then listen back, comparing my pronunciation to native speakers. Hard. I also discovered the value of online dictionaries with audio pronunciations. Hard. This was particularly helpful for English words that are spelled nothing like they sound, words like thought, through, or nuff. By hearing the correct pronunciation and then immediately attempting to reproduce it myself, hard, I gradually trained my mouth to form the unfamiliar sounds of English. Hard. This brings us to the topic of grammar, often the most intimidating aspect of language learning. Hard. I remember feeling overwhelmed by the sheer number of rules and exceptions in English grammar. Past perfect, present continuous, hard. Conditional forms, it all seemed like an impenetrable maze of complexity. But here's something crucial I realized along the way. Hard. Perfect grammar is not a prerequisite for effective communication. Yes, grammar is important, and yes, hard. You should learn the rules over time. But don't let concerns about perfect grammar prevent you from speaking and expressing yourself. Hard. I shifted my focus from grammatical perfection to clear communication. Hard. Instead of obsessing over whether I was using exactly the right tense or structure, I concentrated on making myself understood. Hard. Surprisingly, this not only reduced my anxiety but also led to more natural grammar acquisition. As I used the language more freely, hard, the correct patterns began to feel intuitive rather than like rules I had to consciously remember. Hard. Reading played a vital role in my language development as well. Hard. I started with simple materials, children's books, with their straightforward language and helpful illustrations. Hard. These might seem too basic, but they allowed me to build confidence and reading fluency without constantly needing to look up words. Hard. As my skills improved, I gradually moved to more complex materials, short stories, then articles, and eventually full books. Hard. What I found most valuable about reading was that it exposed me to vocabulary and grammar in context. Hard. Rather than memorizing isolated words or rules, I was seeing how they functioned within real communication. Hard. I didn't always understand every single word I read, but I could usually grasp the main ideas. Over time, hard. I developed the ability to infer the meaning of unfamiliar words from their context, which is a crucial skill for advanced language use. Hard. Consistency proved to be one of the most powerful factors in my language learning success. Hard. I set a modest goal for myself, just 15 minutes of practice every day without fail. Some days I did much more. Hard. But having this minimum threshold ensured that I never completely disconnected from the language. Hard. This daily practice created momentum that carried me forward even during periods when motivation was low. Hard. There were certainly days when I didn't feel like studying, but I would remind myself that 15 minutes was such a small commitment. Hard. Once I started, I often found myself continuing beyond the minimum because the hardest part is simply beginning. Hard. The effectiveness of this consistent approach taught me that language learning isn't about occasional intensive study sessions. Hard. It's about regular exposure and practice over time. Hard. Think of it like watering a plant. Frequent small amounts are far more effective than occasional drenching. Hard. Writing was another valuable component of my language practice. I began with simple text messages to friends who spoke English. Hard. Comments on social media, short emails. Later, I started keeping a journal in English, writing about my day and my thoughts. Hard. What I found particularly beneficial about writing is that it slows down the language production process. When speaking, hard. We're under pressure to formulate our thoughts quickly. Writing allows you to take your time, consider your word choices, hard, and structure your ideas more carefully. This deliberate practice then improves your speaking ability as well. Hard. Writing also provided a record of my progress. Looking back at journal entries from months earlier, hard. I could see concrete evidence of how far I'd come. Vocabulary I now used naturally that had once been new and challenging, hard. Grammar structures that had become automatic, and a general fluency to my expression that hadn't been there before, hard. One of the most transformative moments in my language learning journey came when I found a language exchange partner online, hard. This was someone learning my native language while I was learning English, so we could help each other, hard. We would spend half our time conversing in English and half in their target language, hard. This arrangement was invaluable for several reasons. First, it provided regular conversation practice in a low-pressure environment, hard. My partner was also a language learner, so they understood the challenges and were patient with my mistakes. Second, hard. I received immediate feedback on my speaking, gentle corrections when I said something incorrectly, and positive reinforcement when I expressed myself well, hard. But perhaps most importantly, these exchanges helped build my confidence. With each conversation, hard, speaking English became less intimidating, hard. I began to focus more on the exchange of ideas and less on my performance as a language learner, hard. This is when English started to transform from an academic subject into a genuine tool for communication, hard. If you're not sure how to find a language exchange partner, there are numerous apps and websites designed for exactly this purpose, hard. Look for platforms like Tandem, HelloTalk, or conversation groups on social media, hard. You might be surprised at how many people around the world are eager to practice your native language while helping you with English, hard. A simple but effective technique I used to reinforce vocabulary was labeling objects around my home with sticky notes, hard. I would write the English word on a note and stick it to the corresponding item: table, chair, door, refrigerator, and so on, hard. These visual reminders created multiple daily opportunities for vocabulary review without requiring any additional time, hard. Every time I looked at or used the labeled object, I would see and often say the English word, hard. This continuous reinforcement helped cement these everyday terms in my memory. You can extend this technique beyond physical objects, hard. For example, you might put sticky notes with relevant phrases near activities: turn on the light, by a light switch, wash your hands by the sink, or set an alarm by your bed, hard. This connects the language directly to your daily actions and environments, hard. One of the most significant shifts in my language learning happened when I began thinking in English rather than translating from my native language, hard. Initially, like most learners, I would think of what I wanted to say in my first language, hard, then mentally translate it into English before speaking. This process was slow and often resulted in unnatural expressions, hard. To break this habit, I started by practicing simple, hard, direct thoughts in English. I'm hungry. I need to go to the store. It's cold today. I would deliberately formulate these thoughts in English without allowing myself to think in my native language first, hard. Gradually, I extended this practice to more complex thoughts and ideas. It was challenging at first, hard, and my internal English voice was hesitant and limited. But with persistent practice, hard, thinking in English became more natural and automatic, hard. This directly improved my speaking fluency because it eliminated the translation step that had been slowing me down, hard. Throughout my learning journey, I discovered the importance of asking questions. In the beginning, hard, I was often too shy or embarrassed to admit when I didn't understand something, hard. I worried that asking questions would make me look unintelligent or annoy the person I was speaking with, hard. But I eventually realized that asking questions is not a sign of weakness. It's one of the most powerful learning tools available, hard. Whether I needed clarification on a word's meaning, help with pronunciation, or an explanation of a grammar rule, hard. Asking directly was far more efficient than remaining confused or making incorrect assumptions. Most people, I found, hard, were actually happy to help when I asked questions respectfully. Many even appreciated my effort to understand their language properly, hard. Those questions not only provided immediate answers but also often led to deeper conversations and connections, hard. Let me share a humorous moment from my early days of English learning, the kind of mistake that feels mortifying in the moment but becomes a funny story later, hard. After sharing a meal with an English-speaking friend, I wanted to express that I was full. However, saying, "I'm full," I said, "I'm full." My friend burst out laughing, which initially confused and embarrassed me, hard, when they explained the difference between full, satisfied with food, and fool, a silly or foolish person, hard. I felt my face flush with embarrassment. But then I started laughing too, and it became a joke between us, hard. This experience taught me another valuable lesson, hard. The ability to laugh at your own mistakes makes the learning process much more enjoyable. If you take yourself too seriously, hard, every error feels like a failure. But if you can laugh and learn, hard, mistakes become memorable teaching moments rather than sources of shame, hard. Developing this sense of humor about my language journey made me more resilient, hard. Instead of being crushed by embarrassment when I made an error, I could shrug it off, correct myself, and continue the conversation, hard. This resilience is crucial for maintaining motivation through the inevitable challenges of language learning, hard. Patience has been perhaps the most important quality throughout my language learning journey, hard. There were many moments when I felt frustrated or discouraged, times when I seemed to be putting in effort without seeing results, hard, or when I made the same mistakes repeatedly despite knowing better. During these periods, hard, I reminded myself that learning a language is not a linear process. Progress often comes in bursts followed by plateaus, hard. Sometimes you might even feel like you're moving backward temporarily. This is all normal and part of the natural learning cycle, hard. I found it helpful to think of language learning as a marathon rather than a sprint, hard. Quick progress is less important than consistent effort over time. Some days you'll make great strides, hard. Other days you'll merely maintain your current level. Both are valuable parts of the journey. When I felt particularly discouraged, I would look back at where I had started, hard. Comparing my current abilities to my beginning point rather than to native speakers gave me a more realistic perspective on my progress, hard. This backward glance almost always revealed significant growth that I had failed to notice in my day-to-day practice, hard. To summarize the key insights from my journey, start with the basics and build a strong foundation, hard. Don't fear mistakes, embrace them as learning opportunities. Listen to English regularly, even if you don't understand everything, hard. Connect language learning to activities you enjoy. Practice pronunciation out loud. Focus on communication rather than perfect grammar, hard. Read materials appropriate to your level. Be consistent with daily practice. Write to reinforce what you're learning, hard. Find a conversation partner for speaking practice. Use visual reminders like sticky notes. Practice thinking directly in English. Ask questions whenever you're confused. Laugh at your mistakes instead of being embarrassed by them. And above all, hard, be patient with yourself and the process. Each of these strategies contributed to my progress, hard. But the most powerful factor was simply not giving up. There were countless times when I could have quit, but I kept going, hard. And that persistence eventually led to fluency. Your English learning journey will have its own unique challenges and breakthroughs, hard. You'll find some aspects easier than I did and others more difficult. That's completely normal, We all have different strengths, hard, weaknesses, and learning styles. The key is to find the approaches that work best for you and then apply them consistently. Hard. Remember that every step you take, no matter how small, brings you closer to your goal. Hard. Whether you're just beginning or you've been learning for years, the principles remain the same. Practice regularly. Hard. Don't fear mistakes, find enjoyment in the process, and never give up. When I think about my own progress, hard, I'm amazed by how far I've come. There were so many moments when fluency seemed impossible. Hard. When the distance between where I was and where I wanted to be seemed unbridgeable. Yet here I am, sharing my story with you in English. Hard. If I can do it, so can you. The path is there, waiting for you to walk it. As I continued my English learning journey, hard, I became increasingly interested in pushing beyond basic communication. I wanted to understand the nuances of the language, humor, hard, idioms, cultural references, and natural expression. This next phase of learning brought new challenges, but also deeper satisfaction. Hard. Confidence was a crucial factor in this advancement. I noticed that the more I practiced, hard, the more my confidence grew, not in giant leaps, but gradually, like a slow rising tide. Hard. This confidence didn't come from perfect mastery, but from accumulating successful interactions in English. Hard. I remember how nervous I used to get when ordering food in English. My heart would race, my palms would sweat. Hard. And I'd rehearse my order repeatedly in my head before speaking. If the server asked an unexpected question, I would freeze in panic. Hard. But with each restaurant visit, each coffee shop order, the process became a little easier. Hard. I began to realize that most people were patient and helpful when they saw I was trying. Hard. They weren't judging my mistakes harshly, they were simply trying to understand what I wanted. Hard. One memorable experience happened at a restaurant in New York. Hard. I needed a spoon but accidentally asked for a spin. The waiter looked confused momentarily, but when I quickly corrected myself, hard. We both laughed. It was a small moment, but it taught me something important. Hard. Most native speakers appreciate your efforts to speak their language, even when you make mistakes. Hard. This realization helped me relax more during conversations. When you're tense and anxious about speaking perfectly, hard, your mind often goes blank, making it harder to access the vocabulary and grammar you've learned. But when you're relaxed, hard, the words flow more naturally. It's a virtuous cycle. The more relaxed you are, the better you speak. The better you speak, hard, the more relaxed you become. Having regular practice with native speakers accelerated my learning tremendously. Hard. I was fortunate to have a friend who spoke English fluently and was willing to help me improve. They would correct my mistakes gently, hard, without making me feel embarrassed or inadequate. These interactions with native speakers expose me to natural, hard, authentic English, the kind that's rarely taught in textbooks. I learned colloquial expressions, slang, idioms, hard, and the rhythm of natural conversation. Hard. I began to understand not just the literal meaning of words, but the cultural context behind them. Hard idioms were particularly challenging at first. Hard. I remember my confusion the first time someone told me it was raining cats and dogs. I pictured actual animals falling from the sky. Hard. Similarly, expressions like break a leg, piece of cake, or hit the books made no sense when translated literally. Hard. Learning these idioms and cultural references gave me deeper insight into how English speakers think and communicate. Hard. It also helped me feel more connected to the culture, like I was part of an inside joke rather than always on the outside looking in. Hard. If you don't have access to native speakers in person, don't worry. Hard. There are many online platforms where you can connect with English speakers for conversation practice. Some are language exchange sites where you teach your native language while learning English. Hard. Others offer paid tutoring from professional teachers. Either way, hard. Regular conversation with fluent speakers is invaluable for developing natural expression and understanding. Hard. As I progressed in my learning, I experienced a profound shift in how I viewed English. Hard. What had started as a subject to study a collection of vocabulary words and grammar rules to memorize gradually transformed into something much more meaningful. Hard, a tool for communication, connection, and exploration. Hard. English was no longer just another academic requirement, but a key that unlocked new worlds. I could suddenly access information. Hard. Entertainment and relationships that had previously been inaccessible. I could read books in their original language. Hard. Understand movies without subtitles, and connect with people from different cultures. Hard. This perspective shift was motivational because it gave purpose to my learning. Hard. I wasn't studying English just to pass a test or check a box. I was learning it to expand my horizons and enrich my life. Hard. When your motivation comes from genuine interest rather than external pressure, learning becomes both more enjoyable and more effective. Hard. If you're currently struggling with English learning, feeling stuck or overwhelmed, hard. I encourage you to look beyond the immediate challenges. Hard. Try to connect with the reasons why you want to learn English in the first place. What doors will this language open for you? Hard. What experiences will it make possible? Keeping these larger goals in mind can help sustain your motivation through difficult periods. Hard. Setting specific, achievable goals was another strategy that helped me maintain focus and motivation. Hard. Instead of the vague ambition to learn English, I created concrete targets that I could clearly measure. For example, hard. One week I focused on learning 10 new phrasal verbs, making sure I understood their meanings and could use them correctly in sentences. Hard. Another week, my goal was to have a 5-minute conversation in English without switching to my native language. Hard. These smaller milestones gave me a sense of accomplishment and kept me moving forward. Hard. I found it helpful to celebrate these achievements, no matter how small they might seem. Hard. Each completed goal represented progress on my language journey and deserved acknowledgement. Hard. These celebrations didn't need to be elaborate. Sometimes just taking a moment to feel proud of myself was enough. Hard. One particularly ambitious goal I set for myself was giving a presentation in English. This was for a work project. Hard. And the thought of speaking in English in front of a group terrified me. I practiced for weeks, hard, rehearsing my speech repeatedly until I felt comfortable with every word and phrase. When the day finally came, hard, I was incredibly nervous. My hands trembled, and at one point, I forgot part of what I had planned to say. But I pushed through, hard, managed to deliver the entire presentation in English, and felt an enormous sense of accomplishment afterward. Hard. This experience taught me the value of stretching beyond my comfort zone. Hard. The presentation wasn't perfect. I made some mistakes and had moments of hesitation, but it represented significant growth from where I had started. Hard. Sometimes the activities that make us most nervous also offer the greatest potential for advancement. Hard. Finding ways to connect English learning with my personal interests made the process more enjoyable and sustainable. Hard. I've always been passionate about soccer, so I started watching matches with English commentary. At first, hard, the rapid-fire speech was challenging to follow, but my interest in the sport kept me engaged despite the difficulty. Over time, hard, my comprehension improved dramatically. I began to understand not just the basic play-by-play commentary, but also the analysis, hard, the jokes between commentators, and the cultural references. Because I was genuinely interested in the content, hard, I remained motivated to listen even when comprehension was difficult. This approach can work with any interest or hobby. Hard. If you love cooking, watch cooking shows in English or follow English language recipes. If you're interested in science, hard. Find podcasts or YouTube channels about scientific topics. If music is your passion, study the lyrics of English songs you enjoy. Hard. When you combine language learning with topics you're already passionate about. Hard. The learning process becomes less about studying and more about pursuing your interests in a new language. Hard. This makes it substantially easier to maintain consistent practice over the long term. Hard. Building connections with other English learners created a supportive community that enhanced my learning experience. Hard. I made friends from different countries who were also learning English, and we would regularly practice together. Hard. Helping each other with vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation. Hard. What made these relationships especially valuable was the shared understanding of the learning process. Hard. We could laugh together at our mistakes, celebrate each other's progress, and provide encouragement during challenging times. Hard. There's something powerfully motivating about knowing you're not alone in your struggles and achievements. Hard. I remember one particular practice session with friends from various countries. Hard. A friend from Mexico City meant to say, "I am hungry," but instead said, "I have hungry." We all laughed, not at him but with him. Hard. Recognizing these kinds of errors as a universal part of the language learning experience. Hard. These friendships also exposed me to different accents and varieties of English. Hard. Practicing with people from diverse backgrounds helped me develop flexibility in my listening skills and better prepare for real-world conversations with English speakers from around the globe. Hard. If you're learning English on your own, consider joining online communities, forums, or social media groups for language learners. Hard. These virtual communities can provide many of the same benefits: support, accountability, shared resources. Hard. And opportunities for practice, even if you don't have a local group to join. Looking back on my journey, hard. I'm sometimes amazed at how far I've come. There were so many points along the way when I doubted myself. Hard. When fluency seemed like an impossible dream. Yet here I am, able to express my thoughts and share my experiences in English. Hard. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It was the result of countless small efforts compounded over time, each word learned. Hard. Each conversation attempted. Each mistake made and corrected. Progress in language learning is rarely dramatic or sudden. Hard. It's the accumulated effect of consistent practice and persistent effort. Hard. If you're currently in the midst of your English learning journey, remember that what seems impossible today may feel natural tomorrow. Hard. The challenges you're facing now: difficult pronunciations, confusing grammar rules. Hard. Vocabulary that won't stick. These will eventually become manageable with continued practice. Be patient with yourself. Hard. Celebrate your progress, no matter how small it may seem, and keep moving forward. The path to English fluency isn't a straight line. Hard. It's a winding road with hills and valleys, fast stretches and slow ones. The key is to keep walking, one step at a time. Hard. Remember, the tips I've shared start with the basics. Embrace mistakes as learning opportunities. Hard. Immerse yourself in English through activities you enjoy. Practice consistently. Find speaking partners. And above all, hard. Be patient with the process. Beyond those practical strategies, cultivate an attitude of curiosity and openness. Hard. Learning a language isn't just about mastering vocabulary and grammar. Hard. It's about exploring a new way of expressing thoughts and connecting with others. Approach English with wonder rather than frustration. Hard. And you'll find the journey far more rewarding. Language learning transforms not just what you can do, but who you can be. Hard. It opens doors to new relationships, new information, new perspectives, and new possibilities. Hard. The effort you invest now will pay dividends throughout your life in ways you might not even imagine yet. Hard. I hope sharing my story has provided both practical guidance and encouragement for your own English learning journey. Hard. Remember that every fluent English speaker, whether native or non-native, was once a beginner. We all start somewhere, hard, and with persistence and the right approach, remarkable progress is possible. Hard. Take a moment now to consider which of the strategies I've mentioned resonates most with you. Hard. Which approach could you implement today to move your English learning forward? Maybe it's setting a specific, achievable goal. Hard. Perhaps it's finding ways to connect English practice with your personal interests. Hard. It could be seeking out a conversation partner or simply committing to consistent daily practice. Whatever you choose, hard, take that first step. Then take another and another after that. Hard. Each small action builds momentum that will carry you forward on your path to English fluency. Hard. And when you face challenges, as everyone does in language learning, remember my story. Remember that I too struggled hard, made embarrassing mistakes, felt discouraged, and wanted to give up at times. But I kept going, and that made all the difference. Hard. You can do this. The journey may be challenging, but it's also rewarding beyond measure. I believe in your ability to learn English. Hard. And I hope you'll believe in yourself too. When I think about what truly made the difference in my English learning journey, hard, confidence stands out as perhaps the most crucial factor. Hard. Not confidence in my perfect mastery of the language, I still make mistakes regularly, but confidence in my ability to communicate despite those imperfections. Hard. This type of confidence doesn't come from flawless knowledge, it comes from experience and resilience. Hard. Each time you have a successful interaction in English, each time you recover from a mistake or navigate through a misunderstanding, hard, you build this practical confidence that carries you through future challenges. Hard. I found that confidence grows most effectively when you focus on what you can do rather than what you can't. Early in my learning, hard, I was constantly aware of all the words I didn't know, all the grammar rules I hadn't mastered, all the nuances I couldn't express. Hard. This deficit-focused mindset was discouraging and counterproductive. Hard. When I shifted to appreciating what I could already do, the conversations I could have, the ideas I could express, hard. The connections I could make, even if imperfectly, my confidence grew. And paradoxically, my progress accelerated. Hard. Confidence and competence build on each other in a positive cycle. If you're struggling with confidence in your English abilities, hard. Try celebrating your capabilities rather than fixating on your limitations. Hard. Keep a record of your achievements, conversations you've navigated successfully, books you've read, hard, videos you've understood, and review it when you're feeling discouraged, hard. Remember, too, that confidence often precedes competence in language learning. Sometimes you need to act more confident than you feel, hard, pushing yourself to speak up even when you're uncertain. This courageous action, even when difficult, hard, is what builds true confidence over time. As my English improved, I became increasingly attuned to the cultural dimensions of language, hard. I realized that truly effective communication isn't just about knowing vocabulary and grammar, hard. It's about understanding cultural contexts, norms, and references. For example, I learned that in many English-speaking cultures, hard, directness is often softened with phrases like, "I was wondering if you could," or "would you mind?" Simply translating the direct requests from my native language could come across as rude or demanding. Hard, even with perfect grammar. Similarly, I discovered that humor varies significantly across cultures. Hard. What's funny in one cultural context might be confusing or even offensive in another. Understanding jokes, sarcasm, hard, and irony in English required not just language skills but cultural awareness. Hard. These cultural insights came primarily through exposure and observation. Hard. I paid attention to how native speakers interacted with each other. Hard. Noting the subtle social rules that weren't explicitly taught in language classes. Hard. I asked questions about expressions or behaviors I didn't understand. Hard. And I read books and watched shows that offered glimpses into the cultures of English-speaking countries. If you're learning English, hard. I encourage you to be curious about these cultural elements. Hard. They're as important for effective communication as the structural elements of the language. Notice how people greet each other. Hard. How they show politeness, how they express disagreement, how they use humor. Hard. These cultural patterns are integral to using English naturally and appropriately. Hard. Another realization that transformed my approach to language learning was understanding that fluency isn't a destination, but a continuum. Hard. There isn't a magical moment when you suddenly become fluent after not being fluent. Instead, hard. There are countless small improvements that gradually increase your ease and effectiveness in using the language. Hard. This perspective relieved a lot of pressure. Instead of striving for some idealized perfect fluency, hard. I could simply focus on being a little better today than I was yesterday. Each new word learned, hard. Each conversation that flowed a bit more smoothly, each joke understood, these were all movements along the continuum of fluency. Hard. It also helped me recognize that fluency varies across contexts. Hard. I might be quite fluent discussing familiar topics like my work or hobbies, but less fluent talking about politics or technical subjects. Hard. This is normal even for native speakers. We all have areas where we're more and less articulate. Hard. Depending on our knowledge and experience with particular topics. Hard. Understanding fluency as a continuum also helped me appreciate progress that might otherwise have gone unnoticed. Hard. Subtle improvements like understanding a faster speech rate, recognizing more idioms. Hard. Or feeling less mental fatigue during long conversations are significant achievements even if they're not as obvious as learning new vocabulary or grammar structures. Hard. For those currently learning English, I encourage you to adopt this more nuanced view of fluency. Hard. Recognize and celebrate progress along the continuum rather than focusing solely on some imagined end state of perfect fluency. Hard. This perspective makes the journey more enjoyable and acknowledges the real improvements you're making every day. Hard. The mental and emotional aspects of language learning have been among the most challenging for me. Hard. Learning a new language isn't just an intellectual exercise, it involves vulnerability, identity shifts, and emotional resilience. Hard. There were days when my motivation disappeared completely, when I felt frustrated by lack of progress. Hard. Or when a particularly difficult conversation left me feeling inadequate. Hard. These emotional hurdles were sometimes harder to overcome than the actual language challenges. Hard. What helped me through these difficult periods was having a strong why, a clear understanding of why learning English mattered to me personally. How my reasons evolved over time? Hard. From practical career benefits to deeper motivations like connecting with people from different cultures and accessing ideas and perspectives that would otherwise be unavailable to me. Hard. When my motivation flagged, reconnecting with these meaningful reasons helped reignite my commitment. Hard. The most sustainable motivation comes from within, from values and goals that truly matter to you. Hard. Not from external pressures or expectations. I also learned the importance of self-compassion in the language learning process. Hard. On days when everything seemed to go wrong, when I couldn't express even simple ideas clearly, hard. I practiced being kind to myself rather than self-critical. I would acknowledge the difficulty, remind myself that struggling is normal, hard, and gently recommit to trying again the next day. This self-compassion isn't about making excuses or lowering standards, hard. It's about creating an internal environment where learning can flourish, hard. Harsh self-criticism tends to activate stress responses that actually make language processing more difficult, hard. While self-compassion creates the psychological safety needed for taking risks and making mistakes, both essential elements of effective language learning, hard. If you find yourself struggling with the emotional aspects of language learning, hard, take time to clarify your personal why. What does learning English make possible in your life? Hard. How will it enrich your experiences or expand your opportunities? Having clear, hard, meaningful answers to these questions provides an emotional anchor during challenging periods. Hard. Another aspect of language learning that I've come to appreciate is the value of immersing yourself in the cultural context of English. Hard. Language doesn't exist in isolation. It's deeply intertwined with history, values, social norms, and shared references. Hard. Understanding these cultural elements enriches your comprehension and expression in ways that go beyond vocabulary and grammar. Hard. I made a habit of exploring English language media that offered windows into various cultural contexts, British television shows, hard, American movies, Australian podcasts, and so on. These experiences provided insights into humor, social customs, historical references, hard, and other culturally specific elements that appear in everyday language use. For example, hard. Understanding why certain topics are approached differently in different English-speaking cultures, hard, or recognizing references to popular culture helped me navigate conversations more naturally, hard. It also deepened my appreciation for the richness and diversity of English as it's used around the world. If you're learning English, hard, I encourage you to explore not just the language itself but the cultures associated with it. Hard. Watch films and television from various English-speaking countries. Listen to music and podcasts. Read books by authors from different backgrounds. Hard. These cultural insights will enhance your understanding and usage of the language in meaningful ways. Hard. Technology played a significant role in my language learning journey. Hard. Offering resources that would have been unimaginable to previous generations of language learners. I made use of language learning apps, hard, online dictionaries, video platforms, podcasts, and social media to supplement my formal study and practice. Hard. These digital tools provided incredible accessibility and convenience. I could practice anytime, anywhere during a commute, hard, while waiting in line or in the few minutes before falling asleep, hard. This flexibility allowed me to integrate language learning into my daily life rather than treating it as a separate activity that required special time and space, hard. I found particular value in apps that use spaced repetition systems for vocabulary learning, hard. These tools would show me words at strategically timed intervals to optimize memorization, hard, bringing back terms just as I was about to forget them, hard. This approach was far more effective than the traditional method of studying long vocabulary lists all at once, hard. Video platforms offered authentic language content on virtually any topic imaginable. Whether I was interested in cooking, travel, hard, science, or sports, I could find English language videos that combined language practice with content I genuinely cared about, hard. This alignment of language learning with personal interests made practice feel less like work and more like entertainment, hard. Social media provided opportunities to connect with English speakers and fellow learners around the world, hard. I joined groups focused on language exchange, followed accounts that shared English tips and cultural insights, hard, and even practiced my writing by commenting on posts in English. For those learning English today, hard. I encourage you to explore the wealth of technological resources available. Hard. Find the tools that align with your learning style and interests, but remember that technology is a supplement to hard, not a replacement for the fundamental practices of listening, speaking, reading, and writing regularly. Hard. As I reflect on my language learning journey, hard, I realize that one of the most valuable perspectives has been viewing mistakes not as failures, but as essential components of the learning process. Hard. Every error I made, every mispronounced word, grammatical mix-up, hard, or cultural misunderstanding contained valuable information about gaps in my knowledge or areas needing refinement. Hard. I began to see these mistakes as guideposts, pointing me toward what I needed to learn next. Hard. Rather than feeling embarrassed when someone corrected me, hard, I started to appreciate these corrections as gifts, personalized feedback that would help me improve. Hard. This shift in perspective transformed my emotional relationship with the learning process. Hard. Instead of dreading situations where I might make mistakes, I began seeking them out, knowing they were opportunities for growth. Hard. I became more willing to attempt complex expressions or discussions on unfamiliar topics. Hard. Even when I wasn't sure I had all the vocabulary or grammar structures I needed. If you're currently learning English, hard, I encourage you to cultivate this growth-oriented relationship with mistakes. When you say something incorrectly and receive correction, hard, try responding with, "Thank you for helping me improve," rather than feeling embarrassed. Hard. View each error as valuable data rather than as evidence of failure. Hard. This perspective makes the inevitable challenges of language learning less discouraging and more informative. Hard. It transforms mistakes from something to be avoided into useful stepping stones on your path to fluency. Hard. Another insight that proved valuable was understanding the differences between active and passive language skills. Hard. Listening and reading are receptive or passive skills. They involve taking in language created by others. Hard. Speaking and writing are productive or active skills. They require you to generate language yourself. Hard. Many language learners, myself included, find that their passive skills develop faster than their active skills. Hard. This is completely normal. You'll likely understand more than you can express. Hard, especially in the early and intermediate stages of learning. However, hard. This gap can lead to frustration if you don't recognize it as a natural part of the learning process. Hard. I remember feeling discouraged when I could understand English television shows but struggled to form basic sentences in conversation. Hard. Once I understood this natural progression, I could be more patient with the development of my speaking abilities. Hard. To develop active skills effectively, hard. I found that regular production practice was essential, speaking and writing, even when it was difficult, even when I made mistakes. Hard. I set small, achievable challenges for myself, explaining my weekend plans to a friend, writing a short review of a movie I'd seen. Hard. Or describing a problem I needed help solving. These production tasks were often challenging and sometimes uncomfortable. Hard. But they were crucial for transforming passive knowledge into active ability. Hard. If you find yourself understanding English well but struggling to speak or write, increase your focus on these productive tasks. Hard. Push yourself to generate language regularly, even when it feels imperfect or limited. Hard. The balance between structured study and natural acquisition was another important aspect of my language learning journey. Hard. Structured study involves intentional learning of grammar rules, vocabulary lists, and language patterns. Hard. Natural acquisition happens through exposure and use, picking up language intuitively through reading, listening, and conversation. Hard. Both approaches have value, and I found that combining them was more effective than relying exclusively on either one. Hard. Structured study gave me a framework and accelerated my understanding of how English works. Hard. Natural acquisition helped me develop intuition for what sounds right and internalize patterns without having to consciously apply rules. Hard. In practice, this meant alternating between formal study sessions where I focused on specific grammar points or vocabulary sets, hard, and immersive experiences where I simply used the language without analyzing it. For example, hard. I might spend 30 minutes studying the rules for conditional sentences, hard, then watch an English movie where I would encounter these structures in natural context, hard. This complementary approach allowed me to progress more quickly than I would have with either method alone. If you're currently learning English, hard. Consider whether your current practice leans too heavily toward either structured study or natural exposure, hard, and try to incorporate more of whichever element is underrepresented, hard. Finding a sense of belonging in the language was a significant milestone in my journey. In the beginning, hard. Speaking English felt like wearing someone else's clothes, uncomfortable, and not quite right, hard. I was constantly aware of myself as an outsider, someone who didn't truly belong in the English-speaking world. Gradually, though, hard, I began to develop a sense of ownership and belonging in the language, hard. I started to see English not as someone else's language that I was borrowing, hard, but as a genuine part of my own identity and means of expression. This shift was subtle but profound, hard, changing how I felt when speaking English and how I approached learning. Several factors contributed to this development, hard. One was simply accumulated experience. The more I used English in meaningful interactions, hard, the more it became integrated into my sense of self. Another was finding ways to express my personality authentically in English, hard, including humor, opinions, and emotional nuances. Perhaps most importantly, I began to appreciate that English, like all languages, hard, belongs to everyone who uses it, hard. The idea that there is a right way to speak English that belongs only to native speakers is increasingly outdated in our interconnected world, hard. English today is a global language with many varieties and accents, all valid for communication. If you're learning English, hard, know that you too have the right to make this language your own, hard. You don't need to sound exactly like someone from London or New York to be a legitimate English speaker, hard. Your unique voice and perspective enrich the language and the global community of English users, hard. As I approached advanced proficiency in English, I discovered a new challenge: the plateau effect, hard. This occurs when you've reached a comfortable level of communication but aren't making noticeable progress toward more sophisticated expression, hard. You can function well in most situations, but you still don't have the precision, nuance, hard, or breadth of vocabulary that advanced speakers possess, hard. Breaking through this plateau required more targeted approaches than the general practices that had brought me to an intermediate level, hard. I needed to actively seek out more sophisticated vocabulary, complex grammatical structures, hard, and nuanced expressions that went beyond basic communication, hard. One effective strategy was reading more challenging material, literature, academic articles, and in-depth journalism, hard. These texts exposed me to vocabulary and expressions that rarely appear in everyday conversation but add richness and precision to language use, hard. I also began paying more attention to collocations, words that naturally go together in English, hard. Instead of just learning individual words, hard, I would note phrases like conduct research rather than make research, or heavy rain rather than strong rain, hard. These collocations helped my English sound more natural and native-like, hard. Another helpful practice was focused listening for specific language features. I would watch speeches, interviews, hard, or presentations by articulate speakers and note how they expressed complex ideas, transitions between topics, or nuanced opinions. Hard. Then I would practice incorporating similar expressions into my own speech and writing. Hard. If you've reached a comfortable plateau in your English learning, hard. Challenge yourself to move beyond it by consciously incorporating more sophisticated language elements. Hard. This kind of deliberate practice at the advanced level can help you continue progressing when general communication skills are already solid. Hard. The journey to English fluency has changed me in ways that extend far beyond language ability. Hard. Learning to express myself in a new language has expanded my perspective, increased my empathy, hard, and developed my resilience in the face of challenges. When you learn a new language, you're not just acquiring a communication tool, hard. You're gaining insight into different ways of thinking and perceiving the world, hard. Certain concepts that are expressed in a single word in English might require a phrase in my native language, or vice versa, hard. These differences have made me more aware of how language shapes thought and more flexible in my own thinking, hard. The experience of being a beginner, of struggling to express basic ideas, and making countless mistakes has deepened my empathy for others who are outside their comfort zones. Hard. Whether it's someone learning my native language or facing any challenging learning curve, I now better understand that awkward, hard, vulnerable feeling and can respond with patience and encouragement. Perhaps most significantly, hard. The long process of language learning has built my resilience and perseverance. There were so many points when I could have given up, hard, when progress seemed too slow or the challenge too great, hard. Pushing through those difficulties and eventually achieving my goals has strengthened my belief in my ability to overcome obstacles through consistent effort, hard. These broader benefits of language learning, the expanded perspective, increased empathy, hard, and greater resilience, have enriched my life in ways I never anticipated when I first set out to learn English. Hard. They're reminders that the value of learning a new language extends far beyond practical communication skills. Hard. As I bring this sharing of my English learning journey to a close, hard. I want to leave you with some final thoughts and encouragement for your own path. First, hard. Embrace the journey itself rather than focusing solely on the destination. Language learning is a rich, hard, complex process with rewards at every stage. Hard. Not just when you reach fluency. The small victories along the way, your first conversation with a native speaker. Hard. The first joke you understand without translation. The first dream you have in English, these moments are worth celebrating. Second, hard. Remember that your English learning journey is uniquely yours. It won't look exactly like mine or anyone else's. Hard. You'll have your own challenges, breakthroughs, and timeline. Don't compare your Chapter 2 to someone else's Chapter 20. Hard. Trust your own process and progress at a pace that's sustainable for you. Third, hard. Know that persistence trumps talent in language learning. Some people may seem to have a natural gift for languages, hard, but consistent practice over time is what truly determines success. If you keep showing up, keep practicing hard, and keep pushing yourself just beyond your comfort zone, you will improve. It's inevitable. Finally, hard. Recognize that learning English is not just about acquiring a skill. It's about opening doors to new connections, information, hard, opportunities, and perspectives. When motivation wanes, hard. Remind yourself of all that becomes possible when you can communicate in this global language. Hard. I hope sharing my experiences has provided both practical strategies and emotional encouragement for your English learning journey. Hard. Remember that every fluent speaker was once a beginner, making the same kinds of mistakes you might be making now. Hard. The difference between those who achieve their language goals and those who don't isn't talent or opportunity, it's persistence. Hard. You have within you everything you need to succeed in learning English. It won't always be easy, but it will be worth it. Hard. Trust the process, practice consistently, and be kind to yourself along the way. I believe in your ability to master this language. Hard. And I hope you'll believe in yourself too. Thank you for listening to English Listening Practice. If you enjoyed this episode, Hard, please subscribe to our podcast to get more content designed to help you improve your English listening skills while gaining valuable insights about life and learning. Hard. Don't forget to leave a comment sharing your own language learning experiences or questions. I'd love to hear from you and address your specific challenges in future episodes. Hard. And if you know someone who's learning English, hard, please share this podcast with them. Sometimes the right encouragement at the right moment can make all the difference in someone's language journey. Hard. Until next time, keep practicing, stay patient with yourself, and remember that every step forward, no matter how small, hard is progress toward your goals.